My name is Sharon Ferguson, and I'm excited to present our paper, Circle Back Next Week, The Effect of Meeting-Free Weeks on Distributed Workers, Unstructured Time, and Attention Negotiation. And this work was part of my internship in the Workforce Lab at SLAC last summer. So researchers have long studied collaboration in virtual settings, and often HCI literature looks to identify challenges in this type of collaboration, such as identifying that frequent meetings and constant notifications make it hard for employees to focus. In turn, we often develop technical solutions to overcome these challenges, such as automatically scheduling focus time in calendars. The problem is, a lot of elements of virtual work, such as focus, are sociotechnical problems with organizational and technical components. A change in one can influence the other, and we need to study these challenges holistically. In this work, we address one element which prevents focus, having too many meetings. Researchers have found that when we collaborate virtually, we lose a lot of the informal and serendipitous communication. So to cope, it's been widely reported that we add more meetings to our calendar. In fact, knowledge workers state that meetings can take up to 85% of their day, and 70% of meetings prevent them from getting their core work done. So to address this new challenge of having too many meetings, organizations are implementing organizational interventions. So one such example is scheduled meeting-free time. For example, this could be 1 week per month where all teams cancel all of their meetings to focus on getting their core work done. And the general belief is that if you give people their time back, they'll be more focused and more productive. Further, meeting-free time has the ability to greatly impact teams collaborating virtually as opposed to in-office teams. As remote workers won't run into their teammates in the hallways or in the kitchen, their scheduled meetings are really the only way they have to connect with their teammates. But this new intervention hasn't yet been formally studied in remote or in-person teams, so we don't know how this time is actually used and how this intervention changes collaboration. Thus, in the first study, we aim to understand how remote employees use their unstructured time during meeting-free weeks and what the associated benefits and drawbacks were. We studied employees at an enterprise software development organization, and primarily those employees in product, design, and engineering. This organization is remote first, with employees located across the globe, and most work entirely from home. In June of 2021, in response to having more meetings during remote work, the organization implemented meeting-free weeks twice per quarter. But when looking at employee survey responses, we realized that even 2 years after these weeks had been implemented, many employees still did not use them or did not find them valuable, and we're interested in understanding why. To understand why these meeting-free weeks were not being used, we used qualitative methods to paint a rich picture of what was really happening during these weeks. We conducted 17 semi-structured interviews with approximately half of the sample saying that they benefited from meeting-free time and the other half saying that they did not. The sample was primarily made up of engineers, as they are most of the organization. During the interview, we asked participants to share their screen with their Google Calendar and walk us through the meetings which happen in a normal week, as well as what their calendar looked like during the meeting-free week that had just passed. What meetings were canceled, what did they do instead, and the work that was normally done during meetings, did that happen in another form? So using the thematic analysis process by Braun and Clark, we generated initial codes inductively, keeping in mind the research objectives, which were the uses of unstructured time and the benefits and drawbacks to this use. We generated codes in relation to these objectives, including uses like to-do list items, conceptual discussions, and personal time, and perceived benefits and drawbacks, including time flexibility and productivity. Taking those initial codes and organizing them resulted in 5 themes: interpretation of meeting-free weeks, personal or role characteristics which affect their use, how they use their unstructured time, benefits of meeting-free time, and drawbacks. Then we reviewed the themes and how they related to one another, resulting in the following framework of how the themes fit together. How individuals interpreted meeting-free weeks, along with characteristics of how they worked in their role, led to how they used their time and associated benefits and drawbacks. Looking at this framework applied across participants, we identified patterns in how different interpretations, roles, uses of time, benefits, and drawbacks fell together, which resulted in 3 patterns or orientations to how employees approached meeting-free weeks. These 3 orientations are the focus orientation, which has subcategories for core work and creative work, the collaborative orientation, and the time-dependent orientation. Starting with the focus orientation, we found that these individuals were often people who had a normally heavy meeting load with many individual tasks as well. During meeting-free weeks, these individuals cancel all of their meetings, and while the core work orientation focuses on clearing their complex, tedious, and backlogged work, the creative orientation aims to learn something new, work on a new project, or experiment. The benefits for both orientations are that they have more flexibility in when and how they work, and they produce higher quality work. The core work orientation perceives an increase in productivity, while the creative work orientation perceives increases in well-being, excitement, and creativity. Both find it challenging to get their teammates' attention when needed, and while the core work orientation perceives themselves disconnected from their colleagues, the creative work orientation is perceived to be less productive in the short term. In the collaborative orientation, these are people or product managers who are often senior in their role, or they work in roles where they're always solving new challenges. They spend this time having ad hoc discussions, in meetings that couldn't be canceled, in meetings to protect the focus time of their team, interfacing with external teams, or having high-level conceptual discussions that they normally don't have time for. They benefit by connecting with hard-to-catch people, which allows them to produce higher quality work and be more productive in the long term. But they feel that they have little flexibility in how they work, and it's hard to get the attention of their colleagues who are focusing. In the time-dependent orientation, these were individuals who had urgent task responsibilities or were responsible for repeating processes and were often leaders. During meeting-free weeks, their time didn't really change. They worked on the same tasks and processes that they normally did, and they might be slightly more productive at these without meetings, but they didn't perceive to gain any flexibility and they had no opportunity to clear their backlog. This study resulted in organizational implications for providing more focus time, which is the ultimate goal to each orientation. For example, for the focus orientation, we can continue to set these organization-wide meeting-free weeks so that even cross-functional workers can focus, and avoid scheduling these during known busy periods. We can also set clear expectations for how that time should be used, either towards creative or core work, or maybe both. For the collaborative orientation, we should encourage meetings to be canceled and replaced with ad hoc discussions only when needed, and including those who absolutely need to be there. These should be limited to a few days in the week so that other people can focus. For the time-dependent individual, organizations should continue to investigate these unavoidable interruptions and the processes for addressing them. During meeting-free weeks, they should designate the smallest possible group for responding so that others can focus, but regularly rotate this group. But one common challenge among all of these orientations was that it was hard to get the attention of others on your team when needed to do your work without relying on the default of knowing that you would have their attention in the next meeting. Instead, they had to use other methods to get the attention of their teammates, but because different orientations were doing different things during these weeks, they had varying levels of attention to these different tools. And this attention negotiation was the biggest barrier reported to effectively using meeting-free weeks. So we know that all work involves some collaboration, where you have to direct your colleagues' attention. And at the same time, we're all constantly deciding where to direct our own attention. So this phenomenon is called joint interpersonal attention. And this process of gathering and displaying signals of availability is easier in some settings than others. Synchronous audio or video calls generally require high levels of attention, whereas other collaborative mechanisms have more ambiguous attention requirements. Chat platforms allow for choice in when and if one responds, and they do not have typical starts and ends. Thus far, attention negotiation strategies have been studied in individuals, but here we study both sides of the negotiation, so the attention getting and the attention delegation, to tie together work on negotiation and technology affordances to identify core negotiation challenges. To study the challenge of attention negotiation, our research objective was to understand the steps to attention negotiation during meeting-free weeks and the challenges that arise. In order to capture truthful and rich experiences of negotiating attention, we borrowed techniques from the field of narrative inquiry in 11 semi-structured interviews with the same population but different participants as the first study. Narrative inquiry involves asking interviewees to tell a story. So in this case, we asked them to think to the most recent meeting-free week that they had participated in and walk us through an example, sharing their screen when they were comfortable, of when they needed somebody's attention and how they went about getting that, and when somebody needed their attention and what that looked like. And through analyzing these experiences, we developed a novel attention negotiation framework of the steps involved in attention negotiation and the factors that affect the process. First, in a two-person attention negotiation example, each person has an attentional state, or what they're paying attention to at the moment, and their attentional strategies, or how they decide what to pay attention to. Person A is trying to get person B's attention, but they may or may not be aware of B's current attention state and how they normally decide what to pay attention to. So A is trying to get B's attention through one of the many virtual collaboration platforms that they use. And A's attention-getting strategy is comprised of the method that they choose, for example, a direct message or a Zoom call, what they add to the content of the communication, such as using emojis to capture attention, and what their escalation plan is if they don't get B's attention on their first try, such as sending a follow-up message or directly calling them. But person B's attention delegation strategy is comprised of their methods for protecting their attention, such as turning off notifications, how they triage their attention or what they prioritize when many things are competing for their attention, such as looking at direct messages first, and any constraints on their attention, such as also listening into a meeting. So both A and B are influenced to choose certain attention-getting and attention delegation strategies based on certain factors, such as their own personal preference for using direct messages or channels, or for not having any unread messages. How much they know about the other person also affects this, for example, whether they think they will pick up a random phone call or not, as well as their current context, such as how many things they have competing for their attention in the moment. And when the strategy for getting one's attention is not in line with the strategy for delegating attention, tensions arise, which can lead to ineffective attention negotiation. And resolving these tensions would result in better collaboration. We identified 3 tensions between attention-getting and attention delegation strategies and 3 general challenges preventing effective attention negotiation. We focus on 2 of these tensions today. One common tension we found was the priority of team-wide or channel communication, as opposed to direct message communication. Managers often thought that anything posted in team channels would be eventually read by everybody in the team. I use mentions, which is like, I want to post this for everyone's visibility, but I need action from 2 people in that 15-person channel. But the employees often felt like there were too many channels competing for their attention, so they would ignore it. In terms of people on the team, I'm one of the least informed people. I find it too noisy and I can't keep up with all of the announcements. One way that we can improve the virtual collaboration platforms that we use to better support attention negotiation would be to send batched updates for non-urgent information. When somebody sends a message in a channel, they could choose to send it now if it was time sensitive, or send it in an update. If they chose to send it in an update, the information would be sent to everybody at the time that each individual prefers to get updates. So maybe this is around their lunch hour or the end of their workday, so that they're not bothered with non-urgent information in between. A second common tension arose when one did not know how somebody else delegated their attention, but assumed it was similar to the way that they personally delegated their attention. And we can describe this challenge using at-mentions. Some people felt that at-mentions were very attention-getting, so they would consistently use this method to get others' attention. Mentions are very similar to direct messages. It depends on how savvy the person is with configuring their notifications. However, others found that at-mentions only sometimes caught attention. I feel like I pay more attention when the mention is right at the start of the message as opposed to towards the end. The problem is that at-mentions signal urgency to some, but specificity but non-urgency to others. One way that we could design tools to ease this tension could be to offer priority mentions. For example, an at Miriam versus an exclamation mark Miriam, one which causes a notification and one which does not, allowing for a more consistent understanding of feature use. In summary, in this work, we approach the study of worker focus holistically, recognizing the organizational and technical components. Studying an organizational intervention, meeting-free weeks, we identified how workers used this time and the collaboration challenges that resulted, needing to use compensating mechanisms to get the attention of their teammates without the default of meetings was challenging. To get to the root of this challenge, we built a framework describing the process of attention negotiation and how it can go wrong. Together, these studies result in implications for improving workplace collaboration, such as designing meeting-free weeks which provide focus opportunities to everyone in the organization, and implications for the design of collaborative platforms which support remote workers through effective attention negotiation without needing to default to meetings. Some limitations of the study was that it was only based on one organization, so it's not clear whether it may generalize. We expect that things like the remote-first culture of the workforce, the demographics, and the industry could impact how meeting-free weeks are used. For example, highly regulated industries may be limited in the ways that they can get attention from their teammates. It was also an organization that had been participating in meeting-free time for 2 years, so an organization just beginning to try it out might have different challenges. It was a smaller number of participants as it was a qualitative study, and it should be validated using more scalable measures such as surveys or diary studies in the future. Thank you for listening, and we would be happy to take any questions.